Hi yogis, welcome back to another episode of RunYogi Diaries. This is your host Santosh Shiva. I hope you had a wonderful week and you also got some time to play, swim, bike, run, whatever is your thing. Every week I bring you conversations with people who are on a journey of well-being and endurance. I hope they spark some possibility in you, leave you with some tips, and perhaps some inspiration to perspire. If you like this channel, consider subscribing to it. Hit like if you like this video, and leave your comments below and let us know what you think. This episode is also available on all major podcast platforms if audio is your thing. In the house today is a veteran of sorts in ultra running, but she started late and went on to conquer the marathon, 50Ks, and ultimately the 100 miler, with a half Ironman thrown in as a cherry on top. What's fascinating about her journey is her transformation from running for self to running for others, pivoting into a foray into coaching along with Coach Rajeev Patel, who has been a pillar in the Bay Area running circles as well. We get behind the scenes of this fascinating journey and also speak about where she's headed next. Let's welcome Anu Singh. Hey Anu, welcome to RunYogi Diaries.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here. I'm really, really grateful to you for giving me a chance to share my journey.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. You have a fascinating journey of running, endurance, and then well being lately. So it's a fascinating combination. So we want to learn about all of that. But before that, let me have you do a quick personal introduction and then we'll jump in.
Okay. So, I am a clinical psychologist. I have a couple degrees actually, even in audiology and speech pathology. So it's like I would say a lot of my professional life has been working with people, and especially with people who have some difficulties. Either it's mental emotional difficulties or actually handicaps and impairments. So that's my professional background. And recently I took that background in clinical psychology and started using it to be a strategist. So I'm a chief strategy officer for a startup. It's in a 5G space. As always, everything is strategy. Whether you have a background in clinical psychology or you have a background in technology, it doesn't matter. So I'm doing that right now. I'm a mother of two wonderful boys. Today, one of them just turned 26 and
Hmm.
the one is 24. So it's marvelous. And I'm also a mother of six dogs. Actually, I had
Wow.
six dogs and now I have two of them. And I'm a grandmother of one dog. So I'm
Wow.
a huge mom person. And um, that's pretty much my background. I'm a musician. I like classical Hindustani music. And that's it. I
Fascinating.
enjoy my time. Yeah.
Nice. So you are a fully expressed, fully blossomed human being.
Oh,
So many
thank you.
facets.
Lovely to hear that. Thank you.
That's awesome. Well, that's terrific. But today we're going to talk about one aspect of your life which you have invested in, which is the area of fitness and well-being.
Mhm.
And maybe we should do a little bit of a flashback. You started your journey maybe what 10, 15 years ago, or maybe more. But
Yeah.
let's go back a little bit in the memory lane and hear about how it all got started. How did running come into your life?
Very good question. So, right from my childhood, I would say I was a little bit of a tomboy. I spent, I would say, not kidding, 60% of my time in trees. I had a favorite tree, and also spent a lot of my childhood outside of India. So it's a good combination only because we had a lot of opportunities outside of India to do sports. Uh, we did. I learned kempo, which is like jujitsu,
Hmm.
swimming, badminton was a big force because we were in Indonesia, and badminton is huge there. But most of my time I spent being a tomboy, playing on the streets with kids and climbing trees, and so I was always interested in athletics. But then, I became a mom, slowed down a bit, and um, just continued to move, maybe
Mm.
dance a bit, do some exercises and stuff. Then I was turning 40, and I had, sent out this message to all my friends saying, if you can find me something that I can do, which is new for me, new, unique, adventurous, but can also possibly have a positive impact on others, that would be marvelous. And I did tell them, please don't tell me to volunteer anymore because, been there, done that sort of a thing. Well, one of my friends happened to remember this and told me, you know what? There is an organization called ASHA and they train people to run marathons. So now this is the big part of me. Most of the things that I've gotten into have been due to two main factors: ignorance, total ignorance, and fear, if I'm
Mm.
fearful of it. In this case, it was ignorance. So I went on the website and it said, first of all, I didn't even know what a marathon distance was. So it said 26.2. Now, here comes the ignorance part, Santosh. I am so fortunate that I did not know what it took to even run 1 mile. So I said, oh, 26.2 must be something so simple. Why? Because they're teaching people to run. So obviously, everybody can run that distance. Had I ever run before that, and that too in a sustained manner for even half a mile, I'm not sure that
Mhm.
I would have thought myself capable. So here I was turning 40. It said they will train me to run a marathon. I never done it. But then the second part was that we had to raise funds for the education of children in India. Fabulous. Both those points, something new for me,
Mm.
having an impact on others. So, and as a funny story, is that on that website, they had said that by 1 month time, the only requirement was you should be able to run 1 mile continuously. Now remember, I could not run from here to maybe even 20, 30 meters, maybe that's exaggeration, without huffing and puffing.
Mhm.
And I said, you know what? Let me hire somebody to train me because I really want to do this. Long story short, hired somebody. And the day before I was supposed to go, and it was in Stanford tracks, where they would, kind of time you for 1 mile and they would make sure you could do a mile. I still had not been able to run 1 mile continuously. I thought I'll go there and fudge it. I somehow make sure they don't know that it wasn't a mile. It's a little shy of a mile. Go there, on that day, Stanford, and I start running. And I'm telling you, I just did not know. In the last fourth loop, I said, okay, dear God, I don't think I'll be able to finish this. And surprisingly, I did. And it's just beautiful. The story is always important to me because I remember what I did after running that 1 mile. That was my first mile ever. I went into my car. It was about 8 a.m. I woke up and it was on a Saturday. And,
Mhm.
people still remember this and curse me. I woke everybody up, called them. I ran 1 mile. I ran 1 mile. And then I walked into Starbucks and I swear to God, I thought everybody knew I had run 1 mile. So I walked in there like that, you know. Um, it's rare to get back the magic of that 1 mile. But that was my first entrance into the world of running. I was 40 and I trained to run a marathon with Asha. And
Wow.
that's how it
And this
began.
was what year? Which year was this?
2003.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's got to be almost 19 years since you did
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Wow.
And I must tell you, I was the oldest woman ever to have trained with Asha
Wow.
at that time, oldest Indian, or Asian woman. Um,
Yeah.
but as it was amazing. It's just kick-started a journey, just a turning
Yeah.
point in my life.
Fascinating. Great. Great inspiration. And, I think a great point about at 40, I think in our culture, at least we used to, maybe it's not there as much now, but back then, 40 is like old, right?
That is
You
it.
know, it used to be like that in the South
Yes.
Asian Indian culture.
Yes.
And yeah, I've heard a lot of people say, Abhi kya hai? I mean, what's left now? I mean, I've got a job, I'm married, I've got kids.
Yes.
Uh, but
Yes.
at 40, you can start something. That's
Yes.
amazing.
And I'm glad you brought that up because my father, I'm the only daughter and much doted upon. My father was frightened, genuinely frightened. He actually said, "Are you crazy? I only have one child, one daughter. Do you know what happens at the age of 40?" He says, "Darling, your limbs will fall off." You know, I need to, and there was really that kind of a
Yeah,
prevalent thought culture at that time, and I'm
yeah.
not sure that it's shifted as much all over India, but it has shifted quite a bit. I mean, ever since even I joined, there's been a huge shift and change in that a lot of older women started. Let me tell you, actually, Santosh, I had the year later many people from Asha, the coordinators and even the coaches, if they ever had an inquiry from older people or older women who would say, "Are you sure I can do this?" they would refer them to me. I was the one who would be on the phone with them saying, "Nothing has happened to me. I'm not dead. In fact, I've become stronger. And
Mm-hmm.
surely you must get yourself tested for osteoporosis and all that." I mean, that's a
Mm-hmm.
given.
Yeah,
Nobody should start any program, especially running, without going
yeah.
and getting themselves medically cleared. Although I must admit I didn't, but I've become wiser now. As a coach, I always tell people, please do that. But it was really radical.
Mm-hmm.
And no one that I knew around my social circle um, was running and especially at my age group. And when I joined Asha, there I was 40. Everybody else was at least 10 to 15 years younger
Mm-hmm.
than me. I was also probably one of the few women, or even where you take men into consideration, who was a mother, who had children.
Mm-hmm.
So very different to relieve your children and do something for yourself. Again, there's that different cultural thought culture that
Mm-hmm.
that's selfish. Do things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So
Yeah,
I had to work
yeah,
towards removing or at least educating people about those
yeah.
prevalent cultural thoughts and beliefs.
Yeah, no, that's very nice of you, and I think there's a distinction between selfish and self care,
Yeah.
which hopefully is more clearer now. Because if the mother of the children are not healthy, then what do the kids get in return? Which is that's fascinating. And so you moved on, you continue to scale, right? You did marathons, and then you went on to do even a 100 miler. So how did all that scale? I mean, give us a glimpse of how did that build on.
Okay. So after my very first marathon, the nature of running is such that you get that high, the anandamide, as you say, and there are just so many advantages to going out there and doing something for yourself. Other than the high, there was also the fact that we started having a running community. And that sense of community, we all look for a sense of belonging into various
Mm,
communities. And I had several other communities, but this was a community which sort of was more for me. And was had me allowed me to expand myself in a different direction, not just playing a role. Well, a lot
mm,
of our communities are based on roles. This was a community not based on a role, but then of course it became an identity, like a running identity. So I didn't want to stop. I remember after that first year of 2003, how many of us had post marathon blues, and we realized we don't want to stop. And then we had Coach Rajeev, who I first of all I must say my gratitude to all my coaches. Coach Tony, fabulous Tony Fong, wonderful, wonderful coach, always encouraged me. Coach Rajiv, these were the two older people, older than me. So I was very excited. Them, then there was me. But they were always encouraging. And during the off season, when there was no training, a bunch of us really wanted to continue running. And so we had Coach Rajiv and occasionally Tony who would say, "Okay, we'll take you running." And we signed up for various marathons. I think then it just became the same process which I know a lot of runners experience, which is, when is my next race? Which
mm.
one is it going to be? And in which exotic areas and lands can I take off and run? So I started running. And during this time, I think, there's maybe 3 years later, Coach Rajeev and Anil Rao and a lot of runners around me started entering the world of ultra marathoning.
Hmm.
which is anything beyond 26.2. And they started the world of 50Ks and 50 milers. And being around them, it was very fascinating. I got had the advantage of just imbibing all the stuff that they were talking about, all the food preparations, all this stuff. Well, here's the thing though, they needed somebody to crew them.
Hmm.
And here I am, love that world. So I said I would volunteer. And so a bunch of us would volunteer. The greatest advantage always to, I think, for me in my life is every time I think I'm giving somebody something, boy, am I wrong? It's always that I end up getting in return. So I'd go crew these people. And somehow I think the thought came into me, to say, let me try a 50K 3 years later. I believe, not very good with dates, but so I ran my first 50K. While they all ran their 50 miler, at the same race, I ran my 50K. Um, so once you get into that world of ultra marathoning, I think, a different switch gets turned on. You just face a very different you.
Hmm.
There's a wall at 22, what's what they say. Then there's a different kind of wall after
Hmm.
26. And there's a fascination to keep pushing the envelope and seeing where your boundaries lie, and you want to keep going further and further. The other thing about me, because you've asked me, is that after every 3 or 5 years, I notice, Santosh, that I kind of switch gears.
Hmm.
I tend to get fascinated into a different world. Some may say, or that I don't know how to stick to something, but the truth is that I like to discover something new about myself.
Hmm.
So from 50K, actually, I went into the world of triathloning. Okay,
Oh.
I did not go into the world from 50K onwards to 100 milers. Actually, completely switched gears. I mean, sort of switched gears and entered triathloning. Coach Rajeev Char was a very dear friend at that time, and he and still is, and he was into the world of triathloning. And I was like, what is this? So the biggest issue for me to try triathloning was that I never learned how to bike. My
Hmm.
wonderful dad put me on a bike. When they put me on a bike as a kid, apparently I fell down, and my father put an end to it and said, no, my child is not going to go because she's going to break her bones. um, so I never learned how to bike. And here I was, I believe I was 43 or something, and I'd never known how to bike. And again, here comes ignorance. When you don't know how to bike, you believe that it's easy to bike 56 miles. It's ridiculous. But you think, well, everybody else does it, you know. I was a runner already, so that felt like, wow, I can do this. And then I was a good swimmer. I've
Yeah.
always been a very good swimmer, but not swum in open waters as much. But
Hmm.
I was a good swimmer. Biking, that must be the easiest part. It is actually the longest distance, in a triathlon. And this, so when I learned
This is a
about
half
triathlon,
iron. So this is a half iron.
it
So
is.
it's not even like a sprint distance. It's like boom, directly into half iron. Okay.
Yes. Oh, I'm glad you picked that up, and I'll tell you why that was funny. Because they would do Ironmans, and I was talking to Rajiv Char, and I said, "You think I can do like a half Ironman?" And he was wonderful, wonderful friend, great coach, and he says, "Absolutely, why not?" He didn't know I didn't know how to bike yet.
Hmm.
Okay, so he was thinking, do all the other the other parts can be strengthened. Well, I go to a bike store. Here's the other funny story. So I learned, okay, I'm going to do this. I don't know how to bike. So I go to a bike store and I say, excuse me, I want to buy a bike. I want to buy a red bike. Red is my favorite color. And they're like, what kind of bike? I said, what do you mean? What kind of bike? I want to do a half Ironman and I want to buy a bike. They looked at me and they said, so you want a road bike? I said, oh my God, there are different kinds of bikes.
Yeah.
And the person, I remember when I went the second time to that store, he repeated that story to other customers. He goes, hey, this is the lady here. She walked in here and she says she wants to do a half Ironman, and that too in about 6 months. And she didn't know what kind of bike she wanted, but she wanted a red one. Hey, clarity, very important.
The best part is you say you call it ignorance, but I also think that in that maybe naivety, there is also bravery. There is also the
Sure.
opportunity to try something new, right? I guess,
Absolutely.
right? Either
Absolutely.
so
Yes.
that's something that's kind of a pattern in your story. The other
Yes.
thing is in triathlon, for most parts, people's biggest obstacle is swimming, and in
Yes.
your case, that was done.
Absolutely.
And nobody would have imagined that it would have been a bicycle problem. Maybe running, but nobody would have imagined that anybody would have a bicycle problem, right? That
You
would be the
know,
last on anybody's mind.
Santosh, so you bring this up because I called TNT since Asha was not doing triathlon training at that time, and I always wanted to train in a group. I called TNT and I say, I'm a newbie and then all that. Oh, don't worry about it. We always train people who are new to this. Then I say, so I don't know how to bike, and they go, oh, I remember this conversation. This is, so you want to do a sprint distance? I said, no. I want to train for a half Ironman. So I'm a newbie to the biking part of it. And this was sad because I remember clearly they said, why don't you join and we'll train you to do a sprint? And I said, no, 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 no. No, no. I went from 0 to 26.2, you see? So I'm used to all that. So please, I just want to do a half Ironman. And they said they couldn't train me. They said
Mm,
they were really well versed in training people who didn't know how to swim to learn how to
mm,
swim because the swimming is the shortest distance,
yeah.
1.2 miles or something, I'm forgetting. That there were many people who were bikers who would never run, who could run. They would train them to run the half marathon. But for 56-mile biking, from 0 to 56 in a few months, apparently, you need to really develop your biking muscles. And I learned
Mm,
that very hard way. It's not easy. My problem was not just that. My problem was the problem of balance. You're
mm,
53, you're trying to
yeah.
balance, and it's on a road bike, which is very
Mm,
hard. I had severe falls. I have permanent road rash, badge of honor. Um, and I had to do this training alone. And which was, I think, for me, being a very socially oriented person, I draw my energy a lot from others, and also from swapping stories of, woe
mm,
and pain and misery. There was no one to
mm,
swap stories. Again, though, very fortunate. I had a wonderful support system. All my friends, um, Char, who would bike with me, Rajiv would bike with me. I mean, I had so Rajiv, I remember Char doing every open water swim. You don't swim alone
mhm,
ever
yeah.
with me. So there, I just had people whenever they could, especially on weekends, come and
Mhm,
bike with me. But on weekdays, I had to learn how to bike to learn the whole process. So I segued into that, and it was fantastic. So then I started doing that world, and then I
So which
returned
which which was which one was your first half Iron? Which one did you do?
Miami. Was my
Okay.
first half Ironman. I did so as a training for the
Hmm.
Miami half Ironman. I did a lot of sprint and Olympic distances.
Mm,
I had to. So
yeah. Yeah.
and then there were also several swimming, just swimming 2 mile swimmings.
Mhm,
There was a Vineman aqua bike, you know. So I just did a lot of races, and it culminated in the Ironman, half Ironman.
nice.
I think, as I said, I was just fortunate that I was able to complete that. Um,
Yeah. And what happened after that? Did you pursue it, or was that it?
no, because then I was crewing these people and they wouldn't stop. See, this is the problem. I'm always surrounded by these people who keep trying new things, and then I'm drawn to it. So I was crewing, and I think it was Anil or Coach Rajeev. They started doing 100-mile distances,
Mm,
and this is the story of that. Then I started when I would crew them again at 4 a.m. The crew members would drop them off. Right, it's all dark. Just have a headlamp on, going off into these dark, you know, trails. Every time we drop them off at 4 a.m., I would say, oh, I am so glad I'm not them. And I would say, what? utter fools they are for doing this. I'm so glad I can go back and sleep in my hotel room, then set the alarm and wake up and meet them at mile 50, meet them at mile 75. And I would keep saying, no way would I ever do this. Here's the part that comes the fear that I spoke about.
Mhm.
Every time I would see them, and you see how they start off. Mile 25, you see their faces. Mile 50, you see their faces. Let me tell you that their change in the body, change in the face of these amazing runners who have been out there and just doing it relentlessly. And you're fresh, right? You slept and you've
Mhm.
come, you've stood there. It's just, it creates such a tremendous feeling of awe, wonder,
Mhm.
and fear.
Mhm.
And fear was in me. I said, and oh my dear God, I hope I never become senseless again to try this. I mean, I've been drawn into that world of of triathloning, which was horrifically difficult for me. I never want to do this to myself again. I don't want to be drawn into this world. But here's what I know about fear and me. Every time I'm afraid of something, it makes me realize that I am deeply passionate about this area.
Mhm.
So the fear actually is coming up because within me, there is this deep desire to explore this area of my
Mhm.
passion. Unexplored is there buried somewhere. And a part of my mind is saying, you can't do this. You'll be disappointed. You'll be burnt out. And you may, really discover that there is a limit to what you can do. You're
Mhm.
very human, Anu. And I'll always love to see myself as superhuman. And so I love that idea that, oh, I have managed to achieve everything that I've thought was impossible. But time and again, I would be drawn to reading blogs,
Mhm.
various people, and they started telling me something. Well, if I'm so not into it, then why am I reading about it?
Mhm. Mhm.
Every time, my free time, I'd be crewing or I would be reading. And
Mhm.
each time I would read, I would say, not me. Mm-mm, no can do. You know, I'm a vegetarian, I'm an old woman, older woman, all these things. Um, so then finally, I had to sit down with my family and with Coach Rajeev Patel, and said, so if I wanted to do this, what would it take?
Mhm.
You know, that's usually how I begin.
Yeah, I don't
Which,
want the candy, but tell me more about the candy. Let me think about it.
yeah, no promises, okay? I'm just
No
exploring.
promises. Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
how that, and of course, I was told so many months of training. It'll take so much. Even though I had been marathoning, it didn't matter. The 100 miler is a different beast altogether.
Mhm.
And your nutritional needs, you have to do so much strength training, you have to do cross training. I mean, it's endless. It basically
Mhm.
consumes your life. Um,
Mhm.
Again, especially if you've not been doing it from the very get go, when you're a
Yes.
slightly older person. Well, that's how it started.
Mhm.
And when I was training for that, I think in 6 weeks, I did 450Ks back to back.
Whoa.
Quicksilver, Oloni, Ruth Anderson. I think the Something to the Sea. Um, so they were all
Mhm.
hilly ones, um, rarely flat. And I did a 24-hour run. So you just have to
Mhm.
be on your feet, moving. This was all part of Coach Rajeev Patel's just awesome kick your ass, prepare you. There's also a
Mhm.
lot of mental training.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people have to realize that a lot of this is tremendous mental,
Mhm.
spiritual, emotional training. Um, Above all, one has to be like me, very, very fortunate to have the backing of an entire community. And
Mhm.
my family, my group, my community of friends, um, were always there for me. This, whatever I owned, I think, should be, if this was the buckle, you just cut it in many, many, many
Yep.
pieces and give it to all these people, because you cannot do this on your own. No way.
Yep.
Um,
Makes sense.
yeah.
And your foray into half iron also must have made you a lot fitter and ready for this journey, right?
You're absolutely right. I mean, because your biking is your cross training at
Mhm.
this point. So, anytime you've already learned biking, I
Yeah.
still fall, by the way, no matter what bike I like. Boom. I remember even my 100-mile bike ride, 90-mile, 99, I was so triumphant saying, yay, I've not fallen. At the stop sign, I fell. So, yes, I was much fitter. There was a fitter mental mindset too, I
Mhm.
think,
Mhm.
because of the number of hours that you have to be out there. And there's only so much food you can put in.
Mhm.
If there's only so much you can take in. You're always going to be burning up more than what you can put in. So your body gets used to that. You get used to running in at different times of day. The other thing that was very important and I think was fascinating is how Coach Patel made me do heat training, because the race that I chose, it was be about 100, degrees.
And where was this? And which year
Uh,
was this? Did you do?
Dakota, South Dakota. And so it's called Lean Horse.
And
And
what
there
year
was,
was this?
when was this? 2009. Is that what?
Okay.
Yeah. And it has about 17 miles of hills all put together, and then the rest of it, or
Wow.
maybe even more. So, um, I'm not good with the details right now, but it was something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's quite a bit of hills, and I think that course has changed now. So
Mhm.
it's much more of a flat landscape, but there is no shade, and so I had to train for heat. That was fascinating. I would run in the middle of summer when it was about 2 p.m. Run in that heat, 80 90 degrees. Get into my car, roll up the windows, turn up the heater to 90 degrees.
Whoa.
Come back home, sit in the sauna for about an hour, 110 degrees. But I will tell you this, that kind of training toughened me up so much, because
Mm.
on that day it went up to 110. I think it was an unprecedented hot day. And
Wow.
many seasoned runners um, had to drop out. But because I had trained in heat, and I had also been told and trained because of Coach Patel, that during the hottest time of that run, walk,
Mm.
which is very, very important. I think as runners, sometimes we have this attitude that walking is less than.
Mm.
Mm-mm. I mean, again, that's I can speak to that later, but the walking when it was hot was so crucial. And so yeah, and so I was again very grateful. My family was there. My 14-year-old boy, who was asthmatic, had begged to come along, took time
Mhm.
off from school, and ran 26 miles that day next to me.
Wow.
My dear friend Bharti Dudela was one of the most amazing sources of support for me. She came and she crewed me and ran many miles. Coach Patel ran the whole race. So I've been, as I said, I've been surrounded by very generous, giving people. And they were all of them the wind beneath my
Yeah.
wings,
Yeah.
and I put me into
Amazing.
that race. Yeah.
Yeah. Yay. Let's clap for what happened then. Oh, that's awesome. So that did that fundamentally change you in any way in terms of your relationship to fitness and athletics? And did you continue to do more ultras, or what happened after that? Yeah.
Okay, so my idea of who I am, who I was already changing. Around
Mhm.
2007, I had a experience where I think I had a huge paradigm shift in life.
Mm.
And that particular year, right after my half Ironman, I had to have a surgery. I have Morton's neuroma. And so I was forced to come to a halt for about a few
Mm.
months. I couldn't move. And there was a huge experience where there was a spiritual kind of experience where I began to understand little more about who I am, what's the purpose of my life, and bigger
Mhm.
questions started to arise because
Mhm.
I was not out there running. It was my mind
Mhm.
had to think of other things. What a gift that was. And right from there, I was attending retreats just to get to know myself better. And during that 100-mile race, I will tell you this is the more than the completion of that race, more than the wowness, the glory of that. I think my greatest takeaway from those was that I met different versions of myself.
Mhm.
When Anu who began, the Anu at mile 17 who panicked that, oh my dear God, there are more miles to go. The Anu at mile 22 who fought with her coach
Mhm.
about, they're not doing 16-minute miles.
Mhm.
That Anu, and how I had to work with that Anu. And then the Anu who at mile, I think 55, suddenly I disappeared and I became the road.
Mhm.
There was white gravel, and I suddenly didn't know where I was, and I started feeling very like I was white all over, and there was pressure on me. Mile 70, I see a tree. I don't know who the tree is. I don't know where I am, where I end, where the tree begins. All these ideas and things that I'd been reading about oneness. I
Mhm.
got a taste of it, but when I was in that experience, I didn't know I was in it. This is all a thought that came later.
Mhm.
The revelation at miles that, maybe 80 or 85, that nothing I have done so far is my achievement alone. And therefore, none of the so called failures in my life, too, are mine alone.
Mhm.
We share
Mhm.
everything with the world around us. Everything we do is that is the true feeling of oneness for me. It came
Mhm.
about that even the milkman who gave me milk when I was probably age of 3 or 4 is has to share the credit for what I'm doing
Mhm.
today. He cannot. It just can't happen. Then this whole, there were so many things that insights I had. So I began to realize that one of my issues was not with the whole idea of giving, but a whole bunch of it was about the ego that had to do with the idea of receiving.
Mhm.
Very, very, very big blocks in receiving. And here I was always receiving, but never wanting to acknowledge that fully, probably.
Mhm.
Always wanting to be the giver. But obviously, I'm receiving. There's never a time when I'm not, even the air I'm breathing, I'm receiving, you know. And to understand that receiving and giving, when given without the ego, when the ego doesn't come into play, is a
Mhm.
single act, an act in exchange of love. So you can't even tell who's giving, who's receiving. These are all artificial boundaries. um, it was more of an experience of this, you see. It's not
Mhm.
just a theoretical
Yep.
concept. And after seeing and doing, experiencing that, the very end, I realized that oftentimes in my journey, I had been always torn between sharing my journey and then finding myself feeling a little self conscious, a little awkward about having showed off.
Mhm.
There was always a tug of war. Should I share? You know, should I pretend to be humble? Where do I
Mhm.
start
Mhm.
that? And I recognize, true humility is nothing we can put on. It just comes up. It just shows up.
Mhm.
And for that to happen, we must first experience true pride in ourselves
Mhm.
and in the universe that has allowed itself to, come through us.
Mhm.
And another thing is that had I not read those blogs, I wouldn't be here.
Mhm.
So it's because those people were feeling comfortable in shining their light. Like Marianne
Mhm.
Williamson, who says, when we shine our light, we give others permission to do so.
Mhm.
And that we're more afraid of our light than of our darkness. And this was true for me at that time. There was a lot of light. I was doing all these things. First person to do this, first person to do that. The first 40 plus year old Indian woman, Asian woman
Mhm.
to have run a 100 miler. And now should I now sit back and say, oh, no, no, it's okay?
Mhm.
Or do I write about it?
Mhm.
And I realized that when I write, and if I do write, I will write about the honesty of how this is not easy for me. I'm not
Mhm.
this automatically gifted human being, and
Mhm.
I'm as brave as anyone else. And that my ignorance is, is what I say, my actual bravery came later. But first came the fact that I didn't know anything about what I was going to do.
Hmm.
And therefore, there was no chance for me to feel the fear. But when the fear did come later, then I had to step up. But did I step up on my own? No. I had a whole community around me that wouldn't let me stop.
Hmm.
So then, who does this medal belong to? Right?
Yep. Lot of gold in what you're sharing there. Totally. I think I can, it resonates with what I can, whatever you're saying resonates with me for sure. Like all the marathons I've done, I couldn't have done without the support of my wife,
Yes.
or my parents cheering me on virtually, and
Yeah.
I always think of that. I mean, there are a lot of friends of mine who struggle to scale
Yeah.
I'm talking specifically in the endurance journey. They've done some races and they don't go further, and I've seen most often than not it's because their ecosystem is not cheering them on,
That's right.
and what you just said is platinum, gold, diamond, all mixed together, because I think that's true humility. That's true humility. The humility is not walking around pretending to be, oh, I'm small, but
Yeah.
humility is pretending, I mean, not pretending, but acknowledging the bigness, not in you as well as others as well. So
Absolutely.
that's humility, isn't it? So
That's
that what you're demonstrating is humility.
Yeah, very well said. Absolutely. I mean, nothing can be about an individual alone. It just
Yeah.
can't. I mean, even the very fact that there are these volunteers who are serving you water,
Yeah.
that water that you drank at mile so and so, handed to
Yeah.
you by this particular person who chose that day to wake up, and instead of spending it doing something that would be entertaining or interesting for them, they are standing there in the heat or cold or whatever it is for hours together, handing you a cup of water. And nobody is going to cheer for them. Nobody is going to hand them a medal at the end. They get a little
Hmm.
T-shirt, if
Yeah.
at all, saying I volunteered. The greatness of that being, the
Yeah.
love of that being,
Yeah.
is is the is the shared glory here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there is no story of accomplishment out there that can be written about just one individual. Although we often
Hmm.
only read about that individual, but once you do these distances, let me tell
Mm.
you, you cannot not see that. You cannot
Yeah.
not acknowledge. I mean, it's
So
just
beautiful.
impossible to not see it. You have to be
It's
really blind
beautiful.
to
It's
not see it.
beautiful, and it's such a perfect. It's also such an amazing, powerful metaphor in for life in general.
Yes,
You can take this and look at life and say, yeah, that makes sense everywhere.
yes,
And
absolutely.
also the other thing that you said is a lot of gold in what you said, which is, when you choose to speak about it, when you speak about it, you're also throwing light on others. It's just not throwing light on yourself, and you're not doing service if you're not sharing that great
Yes,
experience.
yes.
So that's another wonderful takeaway, I would say, for folks who are doing great stuff and hiding somewhere thinking, oh my god, I'm not doing anything great. No, come out and share your glory. It's not just about you, it's about everybody else. So
Well,
thank you.
to that I must say kudos to you then, Santosh, because you are giving people a platform to share their stories. And I mean, there's no greater service than what you're doing. And so I must say, I bow to you for that.
Oh, thank you.
I haven't spoken about my story for so long now. And when you asked me to do this, I had to sit and really think back. And it's very easy to forget sometimes all the stuff that we've been through. So thank you so very much again for this.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, my pleasure. All right, now this podcast is about you, so let's get back to you. So fascinating. So this realization happened. Let's move forward. What happened in your journey? What was next?
Sure. So, if I rewind a bit, when I joined Asha, and I did my first marathon. What I observed is that there were many people who began the program and got injured. And it's
Hmm.
just inevitable. It's a sport that's a very high impact sport. And so people got injured. And with the coach's excellent guidance, many of them could continue on after taking short breaks. But a lot of them actually could not continue and do the program. And they were very heartbroken. And many a times they would have to walk more than they could run. And what has happened is at that time there was no marathon, at least that out there. Silicon Valley Marathon too, I think had like a 7 hour or an 8 hour hard cutoff. So you had to finish. That means you had to run. I mean, you couldn't walk a marathon. It takes a lot to walk a marathon and end in 7 hours. So in the year, I believe it was 2004 or 2005, I had this idea about why don't we train people to walk a marathon? Because everywhere around me, all my friends would say to me, Anu, you know what? I cannot run, but I can walk. And I cannot walk that much, but I can at least walk. And everybody would be very apologetic about the fact that they could just walk. Now, this is a very big topic for me because I was always fascinated and a little upset about the fact that we always think of everything in terms of speed and skill. Well, everything in sports, in the area of sports, a lot of value is placed on speed and skill right at a very young age. Even children who have asthma, who have all these difficulties in speed, are sort of excluded from sports. There is really no sport out there that values endurance, mental strength, long distance. There's no such thing, even in schools. And even at that time, there were no marathons that allowed you to walk the distance. You could walk, but you had to finish really fast, by walking. So in Asha, I think in 2005, if I'm right, or four, we started a walkathon program. And what Coach Rajeev Patel did was he went to the Silicon Valley marathon people and negotiated and bargained with them, saying, could you please allow the race to unofficially start an hour earlier for the walkers, our walkers? And he said that he would be there to start the timer and give all the information. So this would give the walkers 1 extra hour. And we did a walkathon. And I was responsible, even I was not a coach. I was one of the core volunteer people now. I joined the core volunteering team, and I was the one who was responsible for the walkathon program. And second thing, this is very important about the walkathon program, was that a lot of older people joined in, right? So this was my other second thing that I wanted. Older people now to say, okay, they don't want to run, but they can do something. If they want to finish the marathon distance, you can walk it. This meant what? That there were a lot of people who had children join. So then there would be an issue of who's going to take care of my child? And what if both parents wanted to join? And so we had a brainwave. We had most of our training on the tracks, a high school track or West Valley here, college tracks, and the children played in the middle. So everybody could keep an eye on everyone. And this is why I say one has to be very creative. And for me, invention became the necessity of mother. For me, mom, I have to somehow take care of my children too. I mean, I can't keep doing my training and then in the evenings also train others. It's just hard. And so my children would play in the middle and with all other children, and we would finish our training around the tracks. Wonderful, wonderful. Because I started noticing that the children now started getting into that world. They understood. They were no longer saying, or maybe you're thinking, oh, mom's just gone off somewhere or dad's gone off somewhere. They were saying this is what they're doing. And the jargon of running, of marathoning, all was all over. And, they started picking up that lingo. So from that, I began to realize that, again, every 3-4 years, that I was really interested in sharing whatever tips I had learned. So as a runner, I shared my tips about walking. What do you do to be a more efficient walker? That's really important. Walking is not easy, and walking longer distances much harder. You're out there much longer, but you also have to find a way to train people to walk more efficiently. And as a result of that, I think when I was asked by Shankarai Foundation, if I could coach, Coach Patel had started coaching there. I said, sure. Heck, I've never done it before. Again, bravado. What could be so difficult?
Hmm.
Coaching is not easy. It really, again, is an eye opener. It reveals so much about yourself.
Mm.
And so I joined Shankarai Foundation and, did some coaching there. And then later on, I think Vibha, you know, Coach Patel was started to coach Vibha running program. I think he formed a running program from there. And when I was asked to join, I became their very first woman coach for
Mm.
Vibha. So as I was doing my training, I also started coaching.
Nice.
So that was the side by side story. And I would tell you this, that what I learned as a coach
Hmm.
and what I discovered about so many of my shortcomings as well as my strengths, so many things about how to lead and what really a leader is all about,
Hmm.
what leading is all about. All that came from the fact that I was given this opportunity. Just
Yep.
very, very grateful for that
Makes
opportunity.
sense. Again, a lot of gold there. You said you jumped in with bravado. I think it seems to be a pattern in your journey, right? Which is jump in either because of ignorance or naivete or whatever the reason. But also, I think what I hear is you calibrate. It's not like you get stuck with that bravado ego trip. It seems like you also calibrate and say, oh, okay, wait a minute, I think this is more than what I can chew. And then you learn how to do it,
Yeah,
which is a great takeaway
yeah,
in my view. Instead of analyzing and paralyzed and being paralyzed, jump in and then calibrate and figure out how to make things happen. And
yeah,
seems
yeah,
like that seems to be.
absolutely. Which is the whole thing about fear, as
Yeah.
somebody has said that you can, forget everything and run away, FEAR, or
Mm,
face everything and rise.
mm,
So either, I always seem to have a pattern of first wanting to run away and then I just run towards
yeah.
whatever it is I fear. Because, the fact is, either one has to keep relearning new
Yeah.
things and discovering who they are, or one can keep doing more of the same and
Mhm,
increase the distances. And this is the way that I am wired. I tend to always find people who inspire me, to
mm,
do new things because they do something new and then I'm gradually pulled into it. Um, and oftentimes, see, here's the thing that most things we learn only by doing it. And
mhm.
nobody goes in there as an expert in anything.
Yeah.
The expertise comes from making a lot of those mistakes. And a lot of people say, the cliches are failures are your biggest teachers. Well, I learned from personal experience. Oh, yes, they are your biggest teachers, but they're also your successes are your greatest teachers. And so that means that because of the fact that I had jumped in
Yep.
before and where I didn't know much, I recognized that I know how to learn. So
Mhm,
the what can always, see, the matter doesn't matter. It's always the process. So there are some ways that all of us can discover how we learn and we can apply that how to anything.
mhm.
But the most
Yep.
important thing is the big yes.
Yep.
Yes, I will do it. Yes, I'm willing to look like a fool. Fool. Yes, I'm willing to say, actually, I don't know the answer to that. I will go find out, which is something that I did a lot and continue to
Mhm,
do as a coach. My go to is always, wow, that's a great question. I don't know the answer. Could you please hold on? Let me get back to you on that. I
Yep.
think that was probably if you ask me what is the greatest, one liner that one can benefit from, it is to say, I don't know.
Mhm.
Sorry, I don't know, but I will find out for you.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
sorry, I don't know, maybe we both can go and find out. Would you go out
Mhm.
there and find out for me? And I will go find out.
Yeah.
And then we come back and we share our notes.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so
Makes
that
sense.
pattern.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
Makes a
That
lot of
has been a
sense.
pattern.
And I think also a lot of now there's a lot of data and science behind neuroscience and brain science, which talks about if you are learning new things, you're imprinting new neural networks in
Absolutely.
your brain. Finally, you're a collection of neural networks. I mean, hey, sorry to break the news to you, right? But we are all, basically a collection of neural networks.
That's right.
And when we learn something new, we are creating new neural networks and maybe creating a new version of ourselves. And it's uncomfortable, but I think, as you rightly said, it's worth it at the end of the day, because you're constantly evolving and you're creating new versions of yourself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
And there's enough science to back it up now. It's not woo woo.
absolutely. If there's one thing too, I would say is that it's important to surround yourself with people
Yeah.
who are far more competent than you, a
Mm,
little more probably adventurous, probably more
mm,
intelligent in areas than you. And
mm,
and so I've always been fortunate that I'm surrounded by people who are far more accomplished than I am, and they always lead the way.
mhm,
And if not for them, I don't think you have to find ways to get inspired. And in my case, I've always had inspiring people around me. And the only thing that I have done is kind of just follow in their footsteps, and
mhm.
then possibly a little later invented something new. For example, I think the coaching program in the women's coaching, they had, Coach Patel is an amazing coach for both men and women, children, all around. But he's also the kind of coach who will say to his co-coach, which is me, and given that he was my coach, he never took credit for everything. He never was grabbing the spotlight. He would always shine the spotlight on me, and he would say, she's a woman, and he would tell all the people there, she has some experiences and knowledge bases. And also, because he would constantly bring up the fact that I was a psychologist, that he would say that she knows a lot about the psychology of running, and he would ask me to share. And I think that as a result, I was actually forced to invent new things and to not just fall back on the fact that I had a more seasoned coach,
Mhm.
as a co-coach. And I had to sit and invent a women's program each year. I had to finesse it a little more. I had to find out what didn't work, what worked. Um, it's a fascinating thing, I tell you, to coach Asian, largely, the Asian women population, because we as a culture, we have a lot of programs that run us, automatic program mode.
Mhm.
And the number one program that women have is, um, how dare I do this? I take time
Mhm.
away from my family. The number two is a serious, and I'm just speaking in broad generalities here. I'm not
Yeah.
saying everybody has this, but let me put out there what are common issues. And it would be wonderful if any woman who's listening to this, can say, yes, I have that too, and not feel so alone.
Mhm.
And the second one is, body consciousness.
Mhm.
Is really, really struggling with self consciousness about the body. The third, as a result of that, is clothes. What kind of clothes to
Mhm.
wear? So, in the world of athletics, you don't get to cover yourself up as much,
Mhm.
right? As it gets, especially if you're training in the hot season, you will more likely be more comfortable with wearing shorts or skirts or even loose kind of pants, but that don't go away all the way down and don't cover your arms. And it was surprising and shocking to me that some of these very basic things that a lot of other women can in this culture can take for granted, that they can go out there and wear shorts, that is a big mental block, that huge body consciousness. Then, as large population of us are vegetarians, we
Mhm.
don't have that much nutritional information out there. It's only starting now. When we started, there were not that many vegetarian
Mhm.
runners, vegan runners. We don't have much of that. So when you keep thinking, there are multiple mindsets. Another very interesting thing that comes up as a woman, when you're running long distances out there, you will have to go. You have to pee.
Mhm.
Okay, there may not be restrooms all over. Now, what
Mhm.
do you do? So many women will not join a program
Mhm.
because they will have that, but they don't know how to ask that question. So, in my coaching program, I actually teach women how to pee in on a trail
Mhm.
where they don't get poison oak, but they
Mhm.
also cover themselves up appropriately, and they also make sure it's don't do it close to playgrounds where children
Mhm.
are, because you'll be sighted. But these is an absolute important thing
Yep.
people don't talk about. Um, Women of Indian origins have a different body structure. Oftentimes, some of us, we are heavy chested at times. So when I'm talking directly to you about this on YouTube, but how are they going to find clothing that supports them? Nobody feels comfortable. So,
Mhm.
there were these things where I'd have to think about what were some of the things that I had to find out while running. How do I wear, if I wear shorts, what do I wear underneath it so that my thighs don't chafe?
Mhm.
And all these things. So, um, that my greatest joy came from the fact that I could share all these tips where there was a lot of laughter, embarrassment, but slowly and
Yep.
surely, the message that was put out there is when you begin such a program, you're now an athlete. So your
Mhm.
mindset is you're no longer thinking woman, you're
Yep.
no longer thinking man, you're an
Yep.
athlete. So an athlete does not think about, am I looking good? An
Mhm.
athlete thinks about, am I comfortable? Can I, is this clothing able to support the sport that I am doing?
Mhm.
Is it sustainable over 1 mile? You may want to wear a different kind of upper garment. If it's going to be longer distances, you want
Mhm.
more support. So
Mhm.
this was the kind of thing that I had to stop and think about. There are
Mhm.
also other things about women's bodies, um, and where there's a lot of shyness and embarrassment, especially in our culture, and to think about and talk about that, and to
Mhm.
encourage older women and to support women to feel that they really needed to think about, as you said, there, the healthier they were, the happier they were, they would take that back home and they
Yep.
would be better mothers, better spouses, better parents, better what have you, um, employees, even. Even,
Yep.
even it changes how you are at work too. And
Absolutely.
so I think I got really excited about this new world of coaching, far more exciting.
Fascinating.
The other part about coaching, and this is where I would like to share when you said, how have things changed for
Mhm.
me. One of the greatest, my greatest mission or my passion is to take anything that seems very elitist,
Mhm.
and make it more inclusive. So let me give you an example. I sing. I'm a classically trained musician, and I used to sing
Mhm.
a lot. And I used to sing karaoke. I go to these parties, and there are many people who were so interested in singing, but would always say to me, "Oh, Anu, how fortunate you are that you can sing. How I wish I could sing. I so wish I could sing. This is my greatest desire." I'm of a belief that music and rhythm is a part of ourselves, and
Mhm.
every one of ourselves. We were all born to sing. And I genuinely believe that. And so I would started talking to adults who wanted to sing, who thought they could never sing. And I would just spend time training them, teaching them. And I would keep saying to them, music does not belong to a select few. It
Mhm.
cannot. Singing does not belong to a select few. And I was so adamant about this. I don't know why. I just had this conviction. Um, and I feel like whenever there's this tremendous joy that I experience, it somehow multiplies for me, when I can share and have others experience that joy. It's the same world in the world of athletics.
Mhm.
A lot of people believe that the world of running is an elitist. It's an ultra
Mhm.
marathon. It's not an elitist sport. Only a few
Mhm.
have the bone structure, the body structure. If they're too big, they're too small. If they have the illnesses, diseases, they can't do it. As a coach, too, it became my mission to focus a lot on those individuals who would join the program but always join with this idea that they would try it out
Mhm.
for a week or two and then drop out, maybe. you know so they would always be at the back of the pack, and the more they were at the back of the pack, the more this mind chatter of
Yep.
being at the back of the pack, the more the idea that this is not for me. And so I think I began to get a lot of joy. This was, again, everything is very selfish, it whatever sustains me, I do
Yep.
that. And so I began to have a lot of joy with being with those people, with those who were at the back of the pack, and showing them and talking to them about how to run, walk. Even when you run, why do you burn out so quickly? What is the
Mhm.
right pace for each person? Coach Patel teaches this a lot too, and
Mhm.
how to incorporate walking into running. And again, how to talk about walking in a way where you have a lot of pride and
Mhm.
joy. And you don't say, I am just walking. The word
Yep.
just has to be taken out.
Mhm.
No just. I am completing a distance. And that
Yeah.
in of itself is fabulous. You're not going to talk about, oh, but I ran, you ran, I walked it. No. So
Mhm.
in our coaching program, in Vibha's coaching program, one of our greatest thing is you're completing a distance. That's the
Mhm.
greatest thing. A second, pace. Everyone's pace is important to them, is significant, is a fabulous achievement. And therefore, the people who are in the back of the pack needed to understand that their pace is wonderful, it's
Mhm.
fantastic for them. And this idea of inclusivity, that means
Mhm.
anyone, we would encourage people to say, just join. And we promise you, this is not just for the elites, just a select few. Even the races that, Coach Patel put up, Rendezvous, he made sure that he increased the time limit to complete certain distances. And he did that because he wanted everyone to have the experience of finishing these distances and not be limited by the fact that they are slower. Why do we
Yep.
penalize our slow people? So
Beautiful.
I think that this is if you ask me as my mission, I think a great passion in making everything in this world to be far more inclusive, and then removing that stigma or from the slower people or the people who are different. And third, introducing tremendous glory and pride into completing distances
Mhm.
and not just talking about how you run it or how much your pace is.
Yep.
Hats off to those who are fast. I have the greatest admiration for them. And that's,
Yep.
they have to be appreciated and lauded. But I would really, really love it if
Beautiful.
we could
Beautiful.
also appreciate those who complete the distances in their own time.
Absolutely. No, that is amazing. That's so much depth and beauty in those thoughts and ideas. Because I think the fact is, while we worship people who win, that's the culture world over. I think maybe it's a capitalistic culture. We worship people who win, but the fact is, that's not life.
No,
That's not life. Life is about completing different things.
that's right.
You live here for whatever 70, 80, 90 years. It's a small speck in the history of the planet. You live for a
Yes,
small speck, and it can't be always about chasing victories all the time. And
yes, yes.
there has to be more to it than that. And what you're saying is such a powerful paradigm, because if you can complete a 26.2, that counts as much as, hey, like Eliud Kipchoge, all the power to him. He's doing sub 2 marathon. Well, we need that,
It's
because
fabulous. Yeah,
right, he's pushing the world. He's creating a new world of possibility for human beings.
absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
that doesn't mean anybody who's doing 26.2 in 5 hours is any less.
That's
Shouldn't be.
right.
It needn't be. So
Absolutely.
so whatever you're saying is so wonderful and so beautiful. Yeah, resonates a lot.
Thank you. Yes.
Perfect. So I had to ask this question: when did Coach Rajiv become Mr. Anu Singh?
I love it. I think he's going to love it too. He and I just got married on July 13th, this last month.
Oh, okay.
We had
Congratulations.
sort of a ceremony that we defined and collaborated on, and we wrote our own vows, and it was different. We were going to have a Hindu ceremony later. The greatest relationship of all is one of friendship. I've
Hmm.
always believed that, friendship with the divine. That's my
Yeah.
relationship with the divine. Friendship with my friends, friendship with my parents, friendship with everyone, with my ex-spouse either, even. And so my friendship with Rajiv started when he was my coach. There's a lot of
Hmm.
regard and respect, but we also became very good friends. And so as time went on, and and just after I had my divorce, I think we slowly changed that relationship from friendship to an even deeper friendship,
Hmm.
where he had to now become Mr. Anu Singh
Hmm.
for us to be in a partnership. So
Yeah.
it's been a marvelous journey, and
Well,
even today I can
congratulations to
tell you
both of
it's the
you, and
greatest friendship of all.
nice. Congratulations, both of you. You guys, both of you are doing such wonderful work in the Bay Area, and hopefully, a lot more people are listening to this. And thank you for what you guys do. So, setting a great example.
Thank you. So I would like to tell you a little bit about what um, the journey of the coaching, how it
Mhm.
morphed into, first of all, as I said to you, into starting to slow down and be with the others. The other thing that I think that it shifted into was,
Can you?
yeah, the other change was I started recognizing that somehow we have to document this. Um, Also, we have such amazing people who trained with us, and they really um, became leaders in their own right. And that there's a world of the world of leading and leadership is often a world that is talked about but not fully sort of fleshed out. I think both Rajiv and I realized that you can't if be effective as a coach yourself if you don't teach others to also become coaches and leaders. Where there comes a time in your life and you have to pass on the baton, and you have to allow people to become now the next generation of leaders, and especially thought leaders, because I think whether even though it's a world of running, it's actually a world of thought leaders. The attitude of coaching, the attitude of running is also as important as the actual sport of running. Um, the greatest things, I think, decision that both of us made was that we decided to retire. And I tell you, in partly because I think that we want to switch gears too, and as again for me, every 3 or 4, and this has been long, 7, 8 years of coaching, every 3 or 4 years, something inside of me begins to say more of the same is not working for me. So I'd like to put this out there for everyone who is a leader of some sort or is a teacher of some sort, that while they teach, it might be extremely important for them to also concurrently, at the same time, simultaneously be thinking about how do they create new teachers.
Mm.
So that's the last part of my coaching was I was always wondering how do I create new coaches now, not
So, is
just
that done? Is
the
that already
runners.
done, or you're in the
Yeah,
process?
we said we'd retire, and I think that we are available to teach, and the new coaches are amazing. They're always turning to us to ask questions, but they've also been fabulous in creating new things for the program, which
Mm.
is, I think, long overdue. Everything, some things need to shift and change.
Mhm.
And we actually discovered that in teaching others, we learned again and again the whole process of how did we learn, and
Mhm.
how do we have to think of the future. We
Mhm.
always have to plan for the future leadership. You can't just
Mhm.
sit there thinking you'll be there forever. And I think
Yeah.
that we learned a lot about ourselves. We learned a lot about how to let go of the ego, because now you don't have
Mm.
your title of coach anymore. So now you're
Mhm.
going to deal with that. It
Yeah.
was a great, great process for me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had to sit and think about, had I started becoming too attached to this, egoic idea of being a coach, Anu. And now I'm saying, nope, I'm nothing. Back to square one, you
Yeah.
know. Uh, and so
Yeah.
it's been fantastic for me to look at that part of me that's very attached to titles and
Mhm.
medals and all that stuff. Every once in a while, I have to stop and do that. It looks
Yep.
like every
So,
once in a
what's
while, I have
next?
to. It's a good question. First of all, I must tell you, I'm very excited because 2 days ago, Rajiv and I were talking, and he mentioned to me again that I've always been fascinated with climbing, and mostly climbing trees. Remember, I'm going back full circle. I started off with living a lot of my life on trees when I was a kid, And every time I see a tree, and all along I like to climb a tree. This is free climbing, not being held by ropes or anything.
Yeah, yeah.
And my son actually asked me recently to look up some program where apparently they teach you not only how to climb a tree, but to put hammocks on the tree
Hmm.
and lie down in the hammock. So, this is a beautiful way to commune with nature, which is something that I'm very interested in. So, as a result of this, I think that I'm now excited and interested in beginning maybe a program of climbing for myself. The
Mm.
next thing that happened in these 2 years was that I started exploring the idea of writing a book. And, it's, I thought it had been written. And then when I started looking at it again, it really seemed terrible. None of it made sense. So after writing about over some thousands and thousands of words, I realized, oh, this is not even good, not even great. So I have to start all over again, I suppose. But it's a thought out there. Um, there's also something that is very important, I think, which is not to go from one activity to the other. This is something that
Mhm.
I'm learning as I'm growing older, that there has to be time for me to hit pause, reflect,
Mm.
spend time some reflecting, spend time meditating a lot more. So now my activities involve a lot of meditation, they
Mhm.
involve a lot of mindfulness. I mean, it's just a common word, and involve thinking about a creative process actually. The whole idea of running, one of the greatest blocks to many people in long distance running is, what do I do with my mind? It's very long, and my mind keeps getting bored, or I want to listen to music as a result of that, or I get the same old thoughts keep coming up. If I've had a fight with somebody, then that's what keeps running. And so people are very scared of their mind and don't know what to do with their mind while running.
Mhm.
My journey in the entire time that I ran was to discover for myself what to do with my monkey mind, because my
Mhm.
mind does work over time too. And I discovered that if I started running by setting an intention before my run, so let's say I'm doing a 15-mile run, I would set an intention. I had saying, this is what I'm going to think about. Part of it was either to say, I'm going to think about, why was I so agitated yesterday when somebody said this to me. So it was a whole world of self awareness and discovery. Because at the end of the day, it was always for me has to do with, no matter what anybody did out there, why was I reacting like this? Why was I responding? So to find the root of my belief system that causes me to respond. So I would set about setting an intention to do that, or it would be setting an intention to be creative. And this is, when I had a 3-hour performance during my as a musician once, and sometimes I would set the intention of saying I'm going to create my thans, combination of notes, or I would set out with the intention of not doing anything, not thinking. So if my mind wandered, coming back to my breath. So these kinds of activities was something that I think I want to now spend more time on.
Okay.
How do I come back to myself and not just make it about go, go, go,
Mhm. Mhm.
or learn something new so I can add that to my
Yeah.
resume.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's where my heart is leading towards. I mean, I ask my heart a lot. I seek clarity by
Yeah.
asking my heart. This is what my mind wants. Is my
Yeah.
body is a very restless body. It always wants to go. But now
Yeah.
my heart and my spirit, it's time for
Yeah.
the heart and the spirit.
Yeah. Makes sense. The world beyond the neural networks.
Yes.
There is consciousness and there are neural networks, and
Yes.
what we train is the neural networks, but there is consciousness above that. And I think what I'm hearing is you're in that direction right now, which
Oh,
is
wow.
to
Thank you.
keep getting
Yes, you're
back into
probably right.
consciousness. So we covered a fair bit of ground in your journey, where you started, what you've been doing in the ultra, in the coaching area, as well as where you're headed. Kind of coming to end of our conversation. But before that, I do have a quick fun Q&A round, which I have with my guests,
Okay.
and then we'll wrap up. So are you ready for that?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. First one. What's your favorite breakfast?
My favorite breakfast is chai with lots and lots of honey. And again, it's not the healthy version, that with lots of honey and um egg whites with onions, broccoli, spinach, and lots of salt. I'm very addicted to salt and some pepper.
Nice.
It's my
I
favorite
thought you
breakfast.
would say idli vada because you're from Bangalore.
Well, here's the thing. Let me tell
But
you
that's a
this.
stereotype.
Mr. Singh here has not, Mr. Patel Singh has not learned how to make South Indian breakfasts yet. And since he makes my breakfast every day, I'm stuck with this version.
But they're good ones. They're good ones.
But thank
All right.
you. Thank you for telling me this because now he's going to be in training. That's my next step.
Absolutely. We'll send in the recipe. Okay. A song, you said you're a singer, you're a musician. A song that uplifts your moods or uplifts your spirit.
Oh, it's going to make it funny. The song that uplifts me most and makes me want to run is Chaya Chaya. Nothing in, you know, Chaya 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 Chaya. 1 2 1 2 1 2.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
much the
yeah.
running rhythm. So there
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
Once a runner,
Yeah.
always a runner.
Yes. That's a beautiful song. Never gets old, right? What's your favorite way to spend a lazy day?
Reading,
Reading. Any
reading.
favorites in reading?
I tend to read a lot of spiritual books.
Hmm.
So nowadays, that's just my passion. Either that or the Lady Detective series, which is the book that I spend when I just want to be, sort of not in mind, that
Yeah.
mind intellectual realm. So um, I'm currently reading a book called Home at Last, and it's a very interesting book about a woman who chooses the Gnana Marga, which is the intellectual marg,
Hmm.
to enlightenment. And it's fascinating.
Hmm.
So, because a lot of people write about the Bhakti Marga, the Marga where they're into devotion and they discover divine or the super consciousness. She says, how do you use most of your intellectual knowledge
Hmm.
um, to getting into higher states of consciousness? So that's what I'm
I'm
reading.
gonna write a book on Run Marga.
That is fabulous.
Get and I think as and I'm not kidding, right? You can reach higher levels of consciousness through endurance sports,
That's perfect, actually. That's
right?
actually perfect.
But nice.
Congratulations on the already knowing the topic, the title of your book.
All I have to do is now write. That's the tough part. All right. Okay. A place you like to travel again.
A place I like to travel to, Italy. Italy, and most people will say, Rome and places like that. I want to go back to Positano. It's
Okay.
the ocean there. Oh my
Lovely.
God,
Yeah.
the waters and the tiered housing and the something about the air. It's very fresh.
Awesome. All right. You did well. And we learned a few more things about you in the process.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. You've actually made me learn new things about myself. See?
Absolutely.
From
No,
this.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
So we're kind of coming to a wrap up here, and I want to give you the last word. Any final message you want to leave with our viewers?
Absolutely. I think that I want to end with what my son Nishad Singh, his birthday today. So I will want to end based on something he said. A really quick story about him was that he was born with severe asthma and he was always um, demoralized because of the fact that he was a boy and he could not do sports, and that often he would be picked on last at a team, and because all the sports were based on speed and skill. And so he has a TEDx talk on that. And it came about, the TEDx talk came about because when I started my journey, he would watch me doing this slow but longer, but a very, very different model. of sports. And, Coach Patel took him running at that time, and he would say, "No, I don't do that. I can't run. I'm going to have my asthma attack." So that he was taught to run very slowly, in a manner where the asthma would not kick in. That was something new. So when it came time to do my 100 mile, as I told you, he was also watching always when I was running, and then he came for many of my runs, and he came to crew me. After that, he was 13 years old. He went and he asked Coach Rajeev whether he could also run a 100 miler. When asked why he wanted to do that, he said, "Because when I saw Amma do her 100 miler, I saw that there was no glory. There were no cheering masses. There was nobody at the finish line." And still she continued. And this is a sport where you don't do it for the medal, you don't do it for the glory, because you actually just do it for yourself. And remember, because he was lonely or alone that time, because he would do most of his things, especially sports wise, alone, this was a sport that seemed very much right for him. And the speed with which he could do it, he could control the speed. And so he was told that he might be able to do it, but he had to do, multiple distances before that. So this boy set out and really trained hard. And at the age of 15, he ran his very first 100 miler. And at the age of 16, he got a world record because he was the first under 17-year-old who ran under 24 hours. So he got the silver medal. It was a big thing for him, and because of the fact that this was a kid who would sit in recess and read. And this was constantly being brought to our attention by the teachers who wanted him out there. He talks again, he has a TEDx talk about the fact that he was pursuing his joy and passion. And he, wanted the world of endurance, slow and steady, to be introduced to school children. I'm bringing this up because if there are last words of advice, it is this. When he was running with me and my 100 miler, it was dark at night. I was on my 77th or 80th mile, and he had been by my side for a long distance. And he looked at me and he said, "Amma," and get this, he says, he's what, 14 years old at that time, 13, 14. "Thank you for not, let me think, thank you for not doing away with selfhood for the sake of motherhood." And I turned to him, I said, "What do you mean by that, Nishad?" And he said, "If you had only been a mother, Amma, and not pursued what you wanted, then would I have been running like this at 2 or 3 a.m., skipping school and running 23 miles?" Is
Yeah.
because you chose to continue to do what you wanted to do.
Mhm.
So my message to everybody is this: please choose selfhood. If you
Mhm.
want to choose any hood, choose selfhood, and you
Yeah.
will be amazed how you then allow everyone around you to choose selfhood. That would
Yeah.
be my message.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. Wonderful message and a powerful message. So, with that, I want to thank you, Anu, for taking your time out and sharing yourself. This obviously is so much wisdom and depth in your life and in your journey. Hopefully, our viewers will take something back and take some inspiration. So, with that, I'll let you go and have enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you very much again. Such a pleasure.
Bye.